From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello, welcome to another edition of the McLaughlin Group. I'm Tom Rogan. Our guests this week are the familiar faces of Eleanor Clift, Clarence Page, and Pat Buchanan. And our special guest this week is Sagaar Enjeti, who is the co-host of Rising at The Hill TV. Welcome, Sagaar. On that note, we shall get to our first issue, which is issue 1, Trumping COVID.
Waving from the White House balcony, President Trump returned home after a short coronavirus-related stay at Walter Reed Military Hospital. But the president's response to his contracting of the virus has raised political eyebrows. While Trump has sought to reassure the public not to allow the virus to triumph over their lives, Democrats condemn the president's rhetoric. They say the president is wrong to compare his access to the best medical care to that of other Americans. Democrats and much of the media also lamented Trump's decision to engage in a motorcade drive-by of his supporters outside Walter Reed.
Pat, your thoughts on the president's response to COVID, suffering it himself, and the political ramifications of his infection?
Tom, I was awake at 1 a.m. in the morning. I believe it was Friday when it came over the wire that the president and first lady had contracted the virus. And from then, he went on to Bethesda Navy Hospital, which is now Walter Reed. He had that drive-by on Wisconsin Avenue for his supporters. He went back to the White House by helicopter. He was up on the balcony. This whole episode of Trump and the virus has taken over the campaign 100%. It's the only thing we're all talking about. And it is not a favorable issue for Donald Trump. It is a focus on the roughest issue he's got entirely, COVID and how he handled it. And I think now he's somewhat dipping in the polls. And if something doesn't intervene, I don't know what is there to prevent, quite frankly, a victory by Joe Biden if he can stay out of the limelight or in his basement for another 20 days.
Eleanor, your thoughts?
I agree with everything Pat said, except the part about Biden staying in his basement. Biden is actually out there. He's traveling. He's been responsible all along, and it's the president who's hiding in PPE gear and face mask. He should be. He's not. Instead, he's infecting everybody else. This is the most irresponsible performance by an American president ever. Other presidents have dissembled about their health. FDR comes to mind, Jack Kennedy comes to mind, but they didn't kill other people with their behavior. The president participated in that Rose Garden ceremony for Amy Coney Barrett, which turns out to be a super spreader event. People were tested inside and told they could take their masks off. This president is a living reminder of how everything he has told this country about the virus is a falsehood. He is now saying it's no worse than the flu. It's a blessing. He got it. People shouldn't be afraid of it. 200 and almost 215,000 people have died. Millions are infected. And he gets medevac to Walter Reed, gets treatments that cost $100,000 and has the gall to come back while he's still infectious and say that he's going to make those treatments free for everybody. The man is manic, and he may be manic in part because he's on steroids.
Sagaar, one of the things, the president's supporters might say is that he is trying to tell the country, look, this is something we have to grapple with, but we cannot allow it to dominate our lives, perhaps to the degree that the Democratic Party would suggest we do. Do you think that goes some way to perhaps absolving him or insulating him from some of the choices he's made in the past few days?
See, Tom, there was a world where that type of strategy could have worked. Unfortunately, given so much of what we've seen with the administration over the last several months, Donald Trump just simply does not have the trust with the American people he needs on coronavirus in order to make that case. They would need to be a clear trust between the American people and the president on the issue of coronavirus in order to project, mold, and change the way that they feel about this virus. But if you look at public polling, the single most damaging thing to Trump's presidency was back in February, whenever he was saying just the flu and comparing it and downplaying the virus. And unfortunately, by returning to that talking point in this recent weeks, while infected with the virus himself, I think he has. I completely agree with Pat. I think he's doing his re-election campaign absolutely zero favors. It's all anybody's talking about. And more than anything, in my mind, it's not just about how he's handling it. It just reminds us all of how he talked about the virus in the early days. And a lot of people on the right don't want to hear this, but it is probably the most damaging thing he's done as president, was back in February, comparing this to the flu.
Clarence, your thoughts?
Well, truly, well, first of all, it's remarkable how much agreement we have today. I mean, who says that nobody in politics can bridge the gaps? We can all say that that President Trump is not handling this campaign as well as his reputation as a marketing genius would tell us. The problem is he needs a second act. My colleagues are right. He's trying repeating the same pitch they had initially, which didn't work, and so he just keeps doing it again. In other words, trying to downplay the importance of the virus, while meanwhile the erosion in his support base, particularly among seniors, those of us who are most vulnerable to the virus, as well as suburbanites who are looking for some kind of stability, especially suburban women who put him over the top last time. This time he's doing very badly. And he's aware of those numbers, but his reaction to them is not realistic. And like Eleanor was saying, it just lends more credence to the notion that he's not in his best mind right now and needs a rest.
Pat.
Tom, the imperative for President Trump was that he move himself out of the center and let Joe Biden occupy it, because at some point the country, which is sort of negative on him narrowly, is going to have to take a look at the alternative. And in my judgment, it has always been problematic because Joe Biden has clear mental and intellectual and verbal problems, which I think if the American people saw it clear every day or in the debates, I think they would say, wait a minute, where are we going? But the problem is that Trump occupies the center and he's constantly in the news, and all Biden and his people have to do is sit there in the basement and then say they're quarantining until the election.
You know, Pat, oh, Pat, do you have nothing better than to just say Biden's in the basement and to keep pushing that old phony saw about he has verbal problems and he's not up to it?
You're going to see him one of these days.
That is not true. The American people have seen that. And Trump started cratering in the polls after the debate last week. There were Fox News polls opened up for Biden, 14 points, 16 points, 17 points nationally. That happened after they saw that debate last week when the president was a maniacal bully. And now the White House has refused to say when he took his last negative test. He might even have been infectious at that point. He arrived late at the debate and refused to take a test. Then he arrives back at the White House. He knows Hope Hicks has tested positive. He knows she's been in debate prep. She's been around him. He takes a test, which takes several hours to return, and he goes to Bedminster to a fundraiser knowing that he is potentially infectious. So this is reckless behavior that cannot be excused.
And my point, he's saying...
Let Eleanor finish and then I'll come to you, Pat.
Yeah.
I can't imagine him being reelected with people knowing that he has the illness and would be impaired. You're talking about Biden's impairment. Okay. Let's hear about Trump's impairment. He's the one with COVID. He's the one with the after effects of COVID. I'm really tired of you pushing those phony lines about Biden.
You and the media have been covering this up with Biden. Not a day goes by that he doesn't make a gaffe or a fault or make a statement. The other day I saw him when he mentioned something was coming up, and he said, wait a minute, let me think of what I'm going to say. But Joe Biden, in my judgment, is not intellectually or mentally as sharp and tough enough to be president of the United States. But we may very well, you're right, find out.
All right, let's go to Clarence and then we'll finish.
When did that media conspiracy meet, Pat? You never tell me about this. I missed out on it.
It's a contagion. It's a contagion, not a conspiracy.
Joe Biden looked perfectly fine to me and a lot of other people, and that's Trump's problem. He's been saying for months that he's been hiding in the basement. He can't talk, can't think. He can do all that. In fact, if Trump would have let him talk some more, if there was a case to be made for Joe not being able to put stuff together, we would have seen it. But we didn't get a chance because Trump kept babbling.
Let's go to Sagaar to finish us up.
I completely agree with both Pat and Clarence here, which is that Trump needs to get out of his own way. He actually should have let Biden speak more. And to the extent that he can speak, what are we going to learn about Trump? The problem is the central attack Trump has had is that Joe Biden is a tool of the radical left. Now, that's not true, but he is a tool of the globalist establishment. And we can go and we should let Joe Biden tell us all about whether he still believes in free trade with China, if he wants to apologize for letting China into the WTO, and if he wants to apologize for being a tool of the financial industry for 20 to 30 years as senator from MBNA. These are the things that Trump should be pushing Joe Biden on. And even if he wants to talk about Hunter, if he wants to talk about, same. Does he want to pack the court? The man refuses to answer. It's complete and total insanity. These are the things that Trump should be doing. He needs to get out of his own way and put Biden front and center.
All right, let's move on to issue 2, Veep debate.
We cut taxes, roll back regulation, unleashed American energy. This administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through this pandemic. But a Green New Deal, your massive new mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I just need to respond very briefly.
15 seconds, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it.
Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris exchanged barbs in Wednesday's vice presidential debate. Following the Trump administration's coronavirus outbreak, the debate was conducted with a plexiglass separation wall. What some might call a Biden campaign PR stunt, the wall makes clear that coronavirus is back at the top of the campaign endgame agenda.
Eleanor, you saw in that exchange with Mike Pence, Kamala Harris using that kind of prosecutorial theater quite effectively to issue that one-line rebuttal. But how do you rate her performance, and how do you think it supplements the broader campaign environment?
I thought they both performed well, and you're going to look at this debate through whatever partisan prism that you're going to judge it by. I thought Pence was disrespectful to the moderator and to the other candidate, 2 women. I'm not the only woman out there who was saying, "Go, Kamala," when she turned to him and said, "I'm speaking." So I thought the body language was important for the Democratic Party and rallying the base that they need to inspire. And she performed beautifully. You could imagine her on the world stage with anybody. And she had truth on her side. Pence just uttered one lie after another. And the fact that he utters them calmly, he's like an automaton. And the fact that the fly that roosted in his hair for over 2 minutes got most of the attention on social media. It was not an exciting debate. It didn't need to be exciting. Kamala proved herself. Pence did not reverse the downward trajectory of the Trump campaign. So we go forward. And I think that Pence comes across like the toady that he is, and playing to the one person that he knew was watching it. So that's my partisan view. And he interrupted a lot, even though he did it quietly.
All right, I'm looking forward to hearing Sagaar in a second because of his reaction to what Eleanor was saying. But we'll go to Pat first.
Let me get the popcorn.
Well, I think that, look, there's no doubt that I think both of them, or neither of them, made any egregious errors. I think both of them performed well and they made their talking points well. But I do think Pence came off better to me because I thought his arguments, and obviously I agree with them more, but I will say this about Kamala Harris. You begin to understand why she loses support the more debates she holds. It is her persona, sort of smug, sort of self-congratulatory. So I think that, and this was what killed her apparently in the primaries, where she started off extremely strong and lost support the more she talked on stage. But I think that clearly she did not hurt herself badly with her own constituency, which was all important.
Clarence, your thoughts?
Well, I think that the reactions they inspired are partisan reactions. Kamala Harris did her side proud, and people who don't want the Democrats to win could find all kinds of things to criticize about it. But after the previous week, after President Trump lowered the bar the way he did, if they would have just come out there and just been able to stand without going stark raving mad for an hour and a half, they would have been fine. I thought, I'm glad you let off with a soundbite that actually dealt with an issue, because we actually heard some issues this time. The very fact that, Kamala Harris mentioned the jobs in the upper Midwest. That's very important to the voters, and especially to those crucial upper Midwest voters that each side needs to win the race. At the same time, you also had the issues that of Obamacare, which Mike Pence made it sound like thank goodness we got rid of that Obamacare. Now we're going to give you an improved ACA. I mean, they're both the same thing. But I got the feeling from Pence that Obama did wrong, but Trump is doing right. Fact is, the Trump administration has been trying very hard to abolish Obamacare. They don't want to deal with that because it's just suicide at the polls.
Right.
But there it is.
Let's go to Sagaar.
Well, I'll just start off. Look, vice presidential debates really don't matter. They almost never move the polls. In political science research, in debates generally don't even matter all that much. So as long as they hold their own, they're fine. You can go and you can look at, this is a general reflection. I thought Pence did quite well. Kamala Harris has graded me since the very beginning of the presidential campaign, and she graded me last night. I would just say she did speak 3 minutes longer than Vice President Pence. And I've been hearing a lot about mansplaining and about talking over Kamala Harris and interruption on, it's like an MSNBC creation from the thing that I saw. I mean, it's a debate. I mean, people are supposed to interrupt each other. I thought Vice President Pence was quite respectful. He even congratulated her on the historic nature of her candidacy. So I think this is a little bit of a mirage that's kind of being wish casted into reality.
Okay,
by the official clock, there was only 3 seconds of difference between the two of them.
Let's go to Eleanor and then Pat.
Yeah, Clarence just pointed out there was like 3 seconds in difference between what they pointed. But, Pat sees a smug, grading person. I see a strong woman, a Black woman holding her own and representing a changing America and all that Obama coalitions that are going to come to the polls. And I look at Pence and I see an automaton. He barely changes expression. Talk about smug. I give him the crown for smugness.
Okay, Pat, your concluding thought.
Well, yeah, I think one thing Kamala did was that she indicated or left wide open the packing of the U.S. Supreme Court if Joe Biden wins this election. Just like Joe Biden refused to rule it out, she refused to rule it out. That's one of two things. They're going to pack the Supreme Court or they want to retain the option. And that, I think, is one of the major comeaways, which is going to give the Democratic Party some problems in this election. If Trump can give Biden some chances to go out and speak a little more.
Okay. There's a third option, which is the truth, and that is that neither Biden nor Harris wants to alienate. Neither of them wants to alienate their own left progressive wing. That's just practical politics, Pat. You know it, and I know it.
Issue 3, Quad.
When we met last year, the landscape was very different. We couldn't have imagined a pandemic that came from Wuhan. That crisis was made infinitely worse by the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with the foreign ministers of Australia, India and Japan this week. The meeting of the so-called Quad Group in Tokyo had one focus: China, namely strengthening efforts to resist Chinese aggression. But while Pompeo adopted a hawkish tone, new Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says he wants more stable relations with China. In related news, a new Pew Research poll showed sharply declining opinions of China in much of the Western world.
Clarence, your thoughts on what I would suggest in normal times would be pretty big news.
Right. This was largely the idea of former Prime Minister of Japan, Abe, and it's been carried on now, but the steam has gone out of it. He was trying to organize the West in ways that could help to contain is a loaded word, but do something about China's aggression here in recent years. But what it turned into, from my view on this side of the big pond, was Pompeo went in to express the grievances that President Trump talks about every week, and everybody else listened patiently because this whole thing is kind of crumbling as a useful exercise. I think that Asia is waiting for Trump to be replaced in November as well. So we'll see what happens.
So, Sagaar, one of the things that I find quite striking with the Trump administration is that, we do have President Trump's rhetoric that Xi Jinping is his friend, but in the measure of detail, the American stance against China, really across the board, trade, human rights, security, allies, seems a lot more robust than President Obama. I mean, is that fair, do you think?
Oh, I mean, there's no question about it. And I mean, I think the idea that the world is waiting for Joe Biden to come in and to lead something against China, this is the person who built an entire career appeasing the Chinese, flying to Beijing and bragging about how much time he spent with Xi Jinping conducting so-called diplomacy while American jobs shipped 10,000 per month over to the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, it's the clearest thing that I've ever seen. On the substance of it, Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump, the Trump administration is the best administration on China in modern history. There's just no question about it. That Pew Research polling that you pointed, this is the beginning of a pan-Western East Asian alliance against China. We're talking about precipitous drops in approval ratings in every civilized democracy across the Western world and in East Asia. The only outlier is the Chinese Communist Party. And because of this plague that they've basically unleashed upon us and their handling of it, they deserve it. It's the beginning of something the Trump administration is certainly going to, I think they're doing it right now, and they're just going to continue to do so. I have zero confidence whatsoever the Biden administration will do.
Ask the question, is the U.S. in a better relationship when it comes to the trade deficit and everything else with China today than it was 4 years ago? And the answer is no. So all this grand architecture that you see, it's a mirage.
Wouldn't there be an argument to say that the Obama administration's reliance on carbon emissions in China as the legacy accomplishment there is fallacious in the sense that China has put on hundreds more coal plants?
Tackling climate change will require leadership. If Donald Trump had followed up and been a leader instead letting China get away with it, we might see a different picture today. But I see China differently because they know they will drown in their own pollution, and they are actually trying to clean up their act. And they could do it a lot better if they got help from America in terms of technology instead of getting a green light from America, because Trump is leading the only nation now that's not in the Paris climate change. So I think this is about leadership, and I don't think Trump has shown it. I think in climate in particular, Pence's performance on climate was ridiculous in the debate, and that's where they lose young people. Climate is now a real voting issue for young people.
Pat Buchanan.
Well, first, in the last Gallup survey I saw, climate change didn't even get into the top 10. But let me say this, I do agree with Eleanor to this extent. The idea that you're going to create some kind of Asian NATO, which is going to conduct a Cold War of containment and corralling China in an expansion and is willing to use any kind of military force, is a mirage. The Japanese aren't going to worry about what's going on in the Himalayas, nor should they. And the Indians aren't worried about the Senkaku Islands or the South China Sea. So I don't think what you've got here is a bunch of nations that want the United States to be there with its fleets and troops in case a crisis occurs, and they can come to their aid. But the idea that you're going to get a one for all and all for one, and if one is attacked, all are attacked, is as I said, a mirage. I think Eleanor is right. But I think a real problem, Tom, coming, is the Chinese are serious about what's going on with us sending all these surrogates over there to Taiwan, with us selling them weapons and things like that. If you do that, you're inviting a war with China, because I think the Chinese will fight rather than let Taiwan go independent. So make up your mind, if you're going down this road, what the end of it looks like.
So Mr. Buchanan's not going to Taipei. But on that note, we should go to predictions. Predictions, Pat.
Vladimir Putin is in deep trouble. He's got tremendous political problems in Belarus with Lukashenko on the way out. He's got a war in the southern Caucasus between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Over in the east, of course, you got the attempted murder of Navalny. And then you've got Kyrgyzstan has now had a government overthrown. He's got real problems in all of the near abroad, and he may not be getting another term after 2024.
But he still has his bridge, Pat. Anyway, Eleanor.
Great bridge.
If too many Republican senators can't make it to Washington to vote for Amy Coney Barrett, Senate Leader McConnell will nuke the language about in-person voting for Supreme Court nominees the same way he employed the nuclear option to get rid of the filibuster so that Republicans could place Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh on the court.
Okay, Sagaar.
I predict that Trump will come around and participate in the debate on October 15th in some form. I just don't think he can pass up 65 million eyeballs and a chance to turn the election around this far in the game.
Clarence.
I predict the Democrats will take the Senate. I've said it before, but I believe it even more now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I predict that Boris Johnson will face an increasing crisis of confidence on the backbenches of the Conservative Party over his handling of the coronavirus, but most importantly, his spending, which, quite frankly, in the US, there seems to be more consensus for government spending. In the UK, getting a little bit dicey. Thank you for watching. We will see you next week.